Today we are going to work on our bills. And so we are going to start where we left off yesterday, Senate Bill 428, and we'll have a brief overview by our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 428 would amend the statute regarding the attendance center needs assessment. It would require that the assessments include input from board members, teachers, school site councils, and school administrators. Secondly, the bill would require that each local board member receive state assessment results and that the results would indicate the number of students who are considered proficient by scoring at a level 3 or 4, and the number of students considered not proficient by scoring at a level 1 or 2 on those state assessments. And then finally, with regard to school district budgets, the bill would require that any time monies are allocated to a fund or reallocated, that would be identified in the school district's budget and budget summary, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Committee, what questions do you have on that bill? Senator Sykes.
Thank you. Tamara, I know we have passed versions of this multiple years in a row. Can you tell the differences between current law?
Senator, you are correct. This statute was amended in both 2021 and 2022, but without pulling up the session laws for those, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what those amendments entailed, but I can do that if you'd like.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, committee, what is your pleasure? Do I have a motion? Or first of all, okay. Well, that's what I was going to go with. Do we have any amendments on Senate Bill 428? Senator Dietrich, I'll call on you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at our list. Is House sub for House Bill 2494 the same as Senate Bill 428? No. Are you saying the description's not the same?
Yes. Let's go through this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, if you have the list of the bills that the committee is perhaps going to work today, the short titles got a little bit messed up, so I'll just tell you what each of them are. So Senate Bill 428 is the attendance center. That short title is correct. Senate Bill 544 is the Academic Excellence Scholarship Program. House substitute for 2494 is the Cardiac Emergency Response Plans. House Bill 2567 is correct. That is the Emerge program. House Bill 2613 is the DARE educator position, the bill we heard yesterday. And House Bill 2669 has the correct short title, and that has to do with the Mental Health Intervention Team program.
Okay, thank you. So we are now back on the amendment that was just handed out. Senator Petty, did you want to explain?
Yes, Madam Chair. So in this legislation, it has a variety of things in it, but on the first page, it does have about, it has under A and B, those from the information that we've been provided by the State Board of Education, this is inaccurate information when proficient and academically prepared by scoring at levels 3 or 4 on and not proficient and not academically prepared by scoring at level 1 or 2 on such assessments. Level 2 is average. Level 2 is performance at the grade level. Having those kinds of statements in statute or those kinds of requirements for school boards to look at would be, I think, put them all at a very poor level to be able to make decisions. That does then keep the rest of that bill as since that's false information, as it was, and that each year they would still look at the assessments and then consider any barriers that must be overcome by students to be able to be proficient.
Committee, is there any discussion? Senator Gossage?
Madam Chair, I wonder if the carry of the amendment would consider then leave, because I think those results are important, and indicate the number of students who are, leave off the word considered, and say scoring at level 3 or 4 on such assessments, and scoring at level 1 or 2 on the assessments, if I could present a substitute motion.
So we have that as a substitute motion, so we're now going to discuss the substitute motion. And the substitute motion is simply on line 28. If I understand you correctly, it would say scoring at level 3 or 4, and on line 30, you would delete everything before and just have scoring at level 1 or 2. Is that correct?
Correct, and to make it grammatically correct, on line 27, we would eliminate the word considered.
Yes. Is there any discussion on this substitute motion? Senator Petty?
So I'm just going to read this. So then each year it's going to be each member of the board shall receive state assessment results for the school district. Such results shall indicate the number of students scoring at level 3 or 4 on such assessments.
It would be who are, we would just strike the word considered.
Each result shall indicate the number of students who are scoring at level 3 or 4 on such assessments, and who are
It would just be scoring.
scoring at level 1 on 2 on such assessments.
I'm just going to say, Senator Petty and Senator Gossage, I'm getting the nonverbal from our reviser, and she will make sure, as well as her proofing team, that grammatically, that we're talking about how many kids have scored at this level, how many have scored at the other levels, correct? Okay. So, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate that. I think that's very clear, and I think that gives the information to the board that we want them to have, and they can easily view it and make their own decisions.
So is that a second? Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any additional conversation? Senator Sykes.
Just a question, because as we move down to line 36 on page 1, because it says to have students achieve proficiency above level 2, would we want to remove the barriers that must, just removing proficiency in there?
Madam Chair, I'd rather have the substitute motion as is, and that could be addressed separately.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, did you want to move your motion?
I move my motion, Madam Chair.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any additional amendments for Senate Bill 428? Senator Petty.
Well, then I think we should consider removing the word proficient in line 36 to be in line with the amendment as it was amended.
Is there any discussion? Senator Gossage.
I guess point of order, can a motion be brought, can an amendment be brought in that manner, Madam Chair?
Well,
Just a minute, my motion. I mean, you asked for a friendly motion.
excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Is there any discussion about eliminating the word proficiency on line 36? Senator Straub and then Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The word proficiency also appears on page 2 in line 6.
Senator Dietrich.
Madam Chair, I don't think I have an issue with the word proficiency because we're talking about proficiency above. So we're not saying that level is proficient, we're saying proficiency above, and I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so Senator Sykes, did you have a statement or question?
Just a question, because I know we had language similar to this in the literacy bill. Is there a way to look at that language to feel comfortable with this?
Our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in Senate Bill 532, which is the blueprint for literacy, that bill does state that there is a goal to have at least 50% of the students in each of the grades 3 through 8 achieving level 3 or above.
Okay, so we had a motion from Senator Petty. I've not heard a second on that. It seems as if we've addressed the issue of proficiency. Are there, so I'll ask again, is there a second on that motion? Seeing none, that motion dies. Are there any additional amendments for Senate Bill 428? Seeing none, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment on this, because I was looking up, I apologize, I was looking up because I know I've read this before. I know that there's disagreement about proficient, but there's not disagreement on what qualifies as academically prepared. KSDE on their website even says academically prepared are levels 3 and 4, because level 2 needs remedial training. So even though it may be on grade level, they still need some assistance. So just to point out that proficient may be in disagreement, but academically prepared is not.
Thank you. So committee, what is your pleasure with Senate Bill 428 as amended? Do I have Senator Erickson? Did you raise your hand again? No. Okay. Do I have a motion to move Senate Bill 428 as amended? Senator Gossage.
Madam Chair, I move that we pass out Senate Bill number 428 as amended favorably for passage.
Okay. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Straub. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We pass that out unanimously. Committee, now we are going to move our way to Senate Bill 544. That is establishing the Kansas Economic Excellence Scholarship Program to replace the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship Program. Let's have a review from our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Currently, Kansas law provides for a Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship that provides financial assistance to students who are residents of Kansas, have financial need, demonstrate academic ability, and identify as members of a specific ethnic groups that are listed in the program. Senate Bill 544 would replace that existing scholarship program with the Kansas Academic Excellence Scholarship Program. And I'll be happy to answer questions.
Committee, what questions do you have? I do have an amendment. Let's go ahead and pass that out. This is based on feedback that we received from testimony. I will explain it. Does everyone have a copy on the committee? Okay. So we have several academic scholarships already available in the state of Kansas. So it's changing this to an education opportunity scholarship. So wherever it said academic excellence, we have simply changed and added the term education opportunity. The reason, part of the reason is we had no definition for academic excellence. So when you turn to page 2, you'll see the nexus of this. It is to be eligible, you're either a first-generation student or you have a parent who is employed in Kansas as a teacher or paraprofessional for any of the grades pre-K through 12. Part of what was shared with us, most university employees and community college and technical college employees, if they're employees of that institution, their children or dependents can attend for free or reduced rate. We have nothing available, as was mentioned by, I believe it was, I think it was Timothy Graham from KNEA. There is no scholarship available that's specifically for anyone that is a teacher or paraprofessional. Also, we do not have a scholarship that's specific for first-generation students. So it's simply saying, Board of Regents, the application is where the student would either identify if they're first generation, or they would identify if their parent is an employee and identify for what school building they were an employee. You will see on line 36 of page 2, it also gives us that first generation student definition. And the reviser indicated that she got that from language that is used. That is, where did you get that? If you would share that again.
It is my understanding that this is the language that post-secondary institutions use.
So that's my amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have a fiscal note on this?
Right now, what I received from the Board of Regents is right now they've been dispersing roughly $300,000 in scholarship. The fiscal note that was originally provided was $1.7 million. That was given for the original, but they have only been dispersing, right now they only have been dispersing around $300,000. So it is already funded.
And I understand that, but it seems like this could be a lot more money.
No,
No?
it is only, it's based on the funds that are made available.
And is that somewhere in the bill? Am I missing that?
I have a nod from the reviser, and she's going to tell us exactly where
Thank
that
you.
is. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In section 2 of the bill, which starts on page 3, you can see in line 8, it says to the extent that appropriations are available. So it is subject to appropriations of the legislature.
Any additional questions?
Then I assume, sorry if I may, so then
Yes.
I can assume then it's the amount that's no more than the amount that is appropriated
Absolutely.
by the legislature.
Correct. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question on definition of first-generation student. The balloon says means an individual whose parent or guardian has not completed a baccalaureate degree. Is that either parent? I mean, if one parent does and one parent doesn't, does that disqualify the student from being considered a first generation? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Because this program is implemented by the Board of Regents, as the language stands currently, it would be up to them to decide how to interpret that. If this committee or the legislature as a whole would like to be more specific about that, you might want to consider adding some clarifying language.
And I'm more than happy if we add more clarifying language. To me, it's always been presented, if a parent has a baccalaureate degree, then their children would not be first generation.
And I'm fine with that. I just didn't know and want to be consistent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So is there a clarifying word that our reviser can put in there that? We'll let her pencil that in. Senator Straub, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many students are currently being awarded this scholarship?
That I don't know. And keep in mind, up until this point in time, it had been exclusive to a student of color. So all I know is the amount. That's all that was shared with me. Yes, Senator Sykes.
Thank you. On those lines, I actually appreciate the amendment on this, and I think this is a good move forward because I was a little concerned with the academic excellence. But my question is, if there are students who are currently receiving this scholarship, are they going to not be allowed, or can we continue making sure that they're receiving something? Because I would hate to jeopardize their education.
What I was told by Dr. Flanders, Executive Director for the Board of Regents, that they would notify the institutions where the students are currently attended and make arrangements so that they would, as long as the student was still eligible, so still in strong academic standing, that they would assure that that would continue on. So it's kind of like for an instructional program where you teach out. So if they were a junior, they would assure that the funding would be available for the senior year. Yes, going back to the reviser. Did you come up with a wordsmith for us?
I think so. So it would mean an individual who does not have a parent or guardian who has completed a baccalaureate degree.
Okay, are we comfortable with that change? I accept that as an amendment. I think it makes it more clear. Is that more clear for you also, Senator Erickson?
Yes, and I don't mean to cause additional work. I just wanted clarification for consistency's sake.
Nope.
So I'm good with whatever the committee
I
decides.
appreciate it because we don't want anyone to be wondering. Senator Gossage.
From someone who was the very first person on either side of my family going clear back as far as one can go in our family tree to be a college graduate. Typically, honestly, I'm not in favor of the taxpayers having to pay for scholarships. I would rather see that done through industry or through the college itself or another association. But this is one not just because of my experience, but when you don't have a parent or anybody that's kind of leading you along that's already been down that path, it can be very difficult to try to figure it out. So this is one that I'm in favor of. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. So committee, I'm going to go ahead and move my amendment. Do I have a second? Okay, second from Senator Erickson. I think we've discussed it. We made the revision. Thank you to our reviser. So all those in favor say aye. Opposed? The amendment passes. Do we have any additions that we want to make to this? Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Or I guess I'm Madam Chair. Thank you. We'll switch places. How about that? We do have one more amendment. Thank you for, we had a request that technical colleges and community colleges be added. This was a request at the Board of Regents. And it was simply that it would, on page 2, just indicate all post-secondary education institutions. Do we have any questions, Senator Sykes?
I will let the will of the body go, but I know we had first-generation college students in the Capitol yesterday, and I had several in my office, And there's a gentleman from Western Kansas who was at Washburn, and it was a 4-year degree, and he was talking about he wanted more of our 4-year colleges to recruit in Western Kansas because there was a lot of talk about community colleges and things like that, and he was talking about in his graduating class, 8 members went to a 4-year college, and they are all continuing in that 4-year degree, but everyone who had gone to the junior college did not finish their programs, so I think we should be cautious because I think we want to make the opportunity there, again, the will of the body, but after having that conversation with someone who felt like they were not being recruited for 4 years as a first-generation student, I think we need to make sure that we are having those conversations and telling them they have a place in our universities.
So we had this amendment. It was at the request of the regents, so I'm going to leave it up to the committee. Senator Gossage?
I move the amendment.
Okay, do we have a second? I have a second from Senator Erickson. Any further discussion? So all those in favor say aye. Opposed? The amendment's on. So committee, I think we do not have further amendments. Do I have a motion to pass out Senate Bill number 544 as amended favorably? A motion from Senator Erickson. Do I have a second? Second from Senator Gossage. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Senate Bill 544 as amended passes out favorably. Thank you for your work on that. We are now going to turn our attention to House substitute for House Bill 2494. And we will start with a brief overview by our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Substitute for House Bill 2494 would require each school district to adopt a cardiac emergency response plan and would provide a grant program for the implementation of such plans. And I'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, so committee, Senator Blasey.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment that was suggested to me just to include outdoor venue, like whether it's a football game or soccer game or baseball game, just to ensure there's some good coverage there.
Okay. So with regard to your amendment, how many outdoor venues do we have in our state, K through 12?
Yeah, great question. I imagine every high school almost probably has some form of outdoor venue. Maybe KSD has the number, who knows?
I'll call on Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How do you define outdoor venue? Because I would think my football field would be an outdoor venue, but are you adding a different?
Well, I'll be honest, this amendment was brought to, I think, by the National Football League, the NFL. So I imagine football stadiums would be covered, baseball stadiums. So in my school district, I know we have a football field, we have a track field, and we have a baseball field. But we don't have soccer fields, but I know one school district does nearby. So they have, those would be what I would consider outdoor venues.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of kids do a lot of running and a lot of risk for a cardiac arrest.
Senator Dietrich.
Madam Chair, could I ask the reviser, is there not language in here? I thought there was language that included school-sponsored activities, whether they're indoor or outdoor, but maybe not. Maybe it was just testimony. I thought that was it.
Correct. The plans themselves would have to address all school-sponsored activities, even if they're not in a school building. However, this amendment is specific to placing those automated external defibrillators in subsection B, so they would have to maintain an automated external defibrillator in each school building or outdoor venue.
So, Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
A follow-up question.
I know exactly what we're trying to get at, and I'm not arguing that at all. It's just, I thought that was already included, maybe on page 3, line 3 and 4, at least one individual such training shall be, okay, it says school-sponsored athletic practice on line 6, or other school-sponsored activity. I was just thinking I read that. Maybe not.
Senator Blasey, and then I believe Senator Gossage, did you have a question? Okay, Senator Blasey.
So I think in the bill as it's currently written, specifically just has school district building, which, you know, obviously gymnasiums would likely be covered under that since they're mostly attached. But I think oftentimes, I don't want to presume this only happens, but I presume most events happen at sporting events. When there's someone in cardiac arrest, whether it's a visitor or a student athlete. Certainly we heard some stories where they happened in class, but we did have a story shared how a student was leaving a game. So that's why I think they wanted to include outdoor venues, because there's just so many athletic events happening out there on the field.
Senator Petty, did you have a question?
I did, and because I had marked that I had some concerns on line 2, on page 2 on lines 15 and 16, about having to have a plan. Those lines speak to for school-sponsored events held at a location that's not on school district property, which could be an outdoor venue, could be anything. So my question about this amendment is that, since it does deal specifically with defibrillators, so this would mean that at any venue, they would have to have a defibrillator someone would have to have a defibrillator at the event. Would that be correct?
Senator Blasey.
Madam Chair, that would be my understanding. In my community, we host ks all classes track events in Wichita, usually at Cessna Stadium, which is currently under construction. But we also have some teams that play at the Windsurge baseball stadium, where they repurpose it for football and for baseball. And so this would just ensure that the school districts would need to have a plan in place to have the appropriate equipment there to ensure there's in the event there was an accident.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think on the first page of the bill, like 26 through 32, it's establishing procedures and roles and responsibilities for the school district for things that are on-site or any school-sponsored activity. So I think that would be included in that they would have that available based on that language.
Okay. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just thinking of all the different locations around my little bitty town that, with that language, I would assume that every one of those locations, the tennis courts, the ball fields, which are actually not owned by the city, they're owned by the city, they're not owned by the school district, the track, the football field, another baseball field, and are these, in this amendment, would these devices be required to be permanently there? Or is it something that a coach or school employee would take to, are they required to be at every practice, at every game, at every competition? I'm thinking cross country. We used to run around a pond on a private individual's land. I'm just, where is it necessary and where does it stop?
Madam Chair?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think we're going to pause for a moment, and we're going to address an issue that we have with this bill, even before the amendment. At no point in time during the hearing was anyone able to quantify what currently exists in our 286 different school districts. We knew that there was a survey, and we knew that those that responded said they had at least one AED. I know in talking to several committee members that when word of this bill first came out, the questions continue to be the same. How many school districts have a plan? How many don't have a plan? How many buildings do we have? At this point, I think each of us, if we just were thinking about our own hometown school district and trying to count how many venues there might be, we'd probably miss a few, but the issue becomes, particularly in the spring session, that the multiple venues are all being used at about the same time. So the girls' soccer team might be at home as well as the men's baseball team, whereas the other two gender teams are competing elsewhere, but those typically aren't the same location. Plus, you've got the track teams out there competing somewhere. And part of the concern about this has always been, and I did reconfirm this morning, this is about our public school districts, our 286 school districts. And I asked the Department of Education, did this start with you? Did requesting information to find out how many buildings do and don't have the AEDs, how many buildings do and don't have the emergency plan? At any point in time, did the Kansas Department of Health, were they reached to coordinate with the Department of Education? And that's why we have still so many questions that we can't answer, because it didn't start with the Department of Education. Now, is there a very real need? I would say there is. Does this bill address the need? No. I think there's still work that needs to be done. I don't think we know how much money it might cost for us to mandate every building, and I appreciate the outdoor venue aspect as well, because that's where you're going to see large crowds gather. I know in Lewisburg, we kind of have the Cafe Gymatorium as far as we have the track is also the football, et cetera. But that's used every day for people not affiliated with the school, just early in the morning and late in the afternoon. So then we start with the issue, is the AED there available for any emergency when there's not even a school function, which I think is the intent, to have it available when people are using the facilities, just like the tennis courts as well. So I think it's fine. We can go ahead and move forward on this amendment. It doesn't get us to the place that some of you have mentioned as far as really getting our arms around how significant this piece of legislation really would be. So Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In looking at starting on line 28 on page 1, and I'll just start on line 26, establishing procedures, including the roles and responsibilities of school district personnel. Granted, this is regarding procedures, so I'm assuming this is where the device would be used. And it goes on to say, while attending school or at the site of any school-sponsored athletic practice. So I would think that that would relieve it being at a tennis court used by the public, or competition or other school-sponsored activity located in the state, whether such site is located on the grounds of the school district or another location. This is talking about the plan and their procedures. And then if we move on, it talks about summoning the emergency medical services that might be nearby, assisting the emergency medical service providers. This would be all part of the plan. So personally, I don't feel like the outdoor venue is necessary. In fact, if anything, I think it's confusing.
Senator Blasey, did you have a response?
Well, Madam Chair, I think I certainly don't want to, if there's a lot of concern about the amendment, I'm happy to withdraw it. I think it was just trying to ensure some clarity on outdoor venues. I think there's been some points mentioned in the bill, how specifically on page 1, they talk about kind of where students are practicing or having competition, whether it's on site or not. So maybe there's already some coverage in terms of outdoor venue, but I'm continue to, I guess, leave it up to the will of the committee on whether they like to proceed with the amendment or the bill as entirely. I think it's has good intentions, hoping to save a life, where that accident may happen, but I'll leave it up to the committee on the amendment.
So did you want to, let's see, so
See if there's a second. If there's not a second, then I'll withdraw.
do we have a second for this amendment? We have a second from Senator Sykes. So, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, as we're talking about, what the chair said about the different, my question is, I'm thinking about, there are situations where schools will use another district's facility. Who's responsible for there's so many questions. Field trips. You know how many elementary school field trips are going to be taking to the zoo, to the park, to the museum, are all of those each going to have a portable? I'm just trying to figure out how this works in practice, Madam Chair. I'm certainly all for doing everything we can to aid in these situations, but I'm worried about the realistic practicality of the verbiage. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we do have a motion. We have a second. Any more discussion on the motion? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not trying to minimize the importance of having AED devices around, but, it just keeps going on. School buses. I think this whole issue would be better suited to each individual school district for them to decide what is or what isn't needed. And I think that's what's currently happening. I do appreciate the people that brought this because it does educate the public, and I wish that's what we had from KDHE or KSHA or the State Board of Education. We have many organizations that could have done an educational type program around this. I don't know that we need a state law for this. Thanks.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the motion to include outdoor venue, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, so that fails. So do we have any additional amendments for House substitute for House Bill 2494? I'm not seeing any. So committee, now let's talk about what do we want to do with House substitute for House Bill 2494. It could be that you want to pass it out. It could be that you want to recommend that this be a discussion item for an interim meeting. It could be that we want to find a way to collaborate with the Department of Education and the Department of Health. It could be a number of things, but what is your pleasure on House substitute for House Bill 2494? Senator Petty.
I'm just it seemed to me when we had the hearing on this bill, is that maybe the number one issue was that school districts had a plan. And this bill talks about that, and the thinking, or at least it came across to appear that there didn't appear to be that school districts had a plan. I don't know that takes legislation. I think Senator Straub mentioned that very thing. But it does raise the whole issue of whether they do or do not have the plan, and who is trained within that staff. And of course, this bill adds the whole element of, as we just talked so much about when you have to have that with you. And it does become pretty cumbersome to figure that part out. So I think, I don't think this bill is ready for prime time.
Okay. So I need either a motion to table House substitute for House Bill 2494 or a motion to pass it out. Senator O'Shea.
I would like to make the motion that we pass House Sub for House Bill 2494 favorably for passage.
I have a motion from Senator O'Shea. I have a second from Senator Sykes. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Okay. So I need a show of hands of who voted aye. 3 hands, okay. All those opposed, I need a show of hands of that. Okay, so it does not pass out. Committee, let's move on to House Bill 2567, establishing the Emerge program. This has to do with our National Guards. So let's have a brief overview of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2567 would authorize the Adjutant General to select up to 100 members of the Kansas National Guard each year for participation in the Emerge program, with up to 200 participants total in any year. Participants in the program would receive tuition and fee assistance for up to 15 credit hours each semester that are required for the participant's master's degree program. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Committee, do we have any questions? Okay, seeing none, do we have any, oh, yes, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not really a question, but comment. After the hearing on this, I did look it up, and I believe post 9/11 GI Bill monies are transferable to spouse and dependents. There's some different criteria involved in that, but I just want to make it clear that those benefits are transferable already. So I think there's already federal monies that can apply to scholarship programs, not just for the Guard members, but also for their families.
Okay, Senator Gossage.
I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to look this up. Perhaps someone else knows, perhaps Senator Straub, but does that include master's programs, or was that for a baccalaureate degree?
I don't think that we have that information. Senator Straub?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure on the exact criteria of it, but I know you're allowed so many years of benefit. So let's say you join the military or National Guard after you already have an associate's degree, you could potentially finish a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in 4 years after that. That's how I interpret it, but if there's anyone from any of the military organizations that can clarify that, I'd welcome that.
I don't see anyone here in the room. I do know that GI benefits do not cover everything for everyone. So that's the limits, and I've been kind of busy on some other bills and wasn't able to get more research on this. Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think we look at lots of scholarship for post-secondary and, master's degrees and things like that. And I just, someone who's an advocate for early childhood education, there's no focus there. And I continue to see us look at these kinds of things and think, if we could put some of that to those years, I think it would be more effective. So just a thought.
Well, that's why we put pre-K teachers in on that other scholarship. You're welcome. Any other discussion? Seeing that there are no amendments, do I have a motion for House Bill 2567, or do I not? Okay, Senator Dietrich.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we move out House Bill 2567 favorably for passage.
Okay, do we have a second? Senator Gossage, we have a second from her. Is there any additional discussion? Yes, Senator Gossage.
If I just may, I wasn't as much in favor of this bill until we had the kind of earlier amendment where we talked about that it was being disabled while in service. That kind of changed my mind on it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Need to correct you. That was on a different bill that we already passed out.
Oh, okay.
This is only for if you are a member of the National Guard.
Oh, if you're a member of the National
Yeah.
Guard. Thank you for the clarification. I'm glad I brought it up.
So I felt that I needed to clarify for that. Yes, Senator Blasey.
Madam Chair, I have a quick question. Maybe something on the committee or staff can help me understand. This bill, if I recall during testimony, the military is always evaluating states and their laws and policies and how they're friendly to veterans and to active members. So I'm curious, was this one of those criteria that the military is looking for when they're looking at military bases and stuff like that? So I know our Occupational Licensure Act was a huge step forward for our military families, so I was just curious if this bill was one of those criteria moments.
I know that it could be in the context that you can serve in the military and then transition from active duty into the Guard. And so that's why we have like the Army National Guard and so forth. So I do know that context. Well, I don't think we asked it, but I do know that that's something. So we have a motion. Did we have a second from you, or were you simply asking a question? Or, okay. I think it was a motion, and then your comment was about, which didn't relate. Okay, so you're withdrawing your second. Do I have a second from someone else? Senator Blasey, did you have a second? Since you brought up the question. Okay. I mean, I'm fine to put a second, it's just so we'll have a vote on it. So it's been moved and been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, it does not pass. So we are now going to move to House Bill 2613, which is our DARE program. Is that correct? Am I right on that? So let's have a brief overview on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2613 would create the statewide drug abuse resistance education, or DARE program educator position in the Office of the Attorney General.
Okay. Are there any questions about the bill? Do we have any amendments on the bill? Okay, so we do have an amendment. Let's get that passed out. So while we're passing this out, Senator Petty, if you would just explain that.
I brought up this issue yesterday, I believe, as we were discussing this bill, and there was no any kind of reporting back about this bill and its successful use. So if you're looking at the amendment on page 2, you see in the box that it says the DARE educator and the DARE coordinator shall report to the Senate Committee on Education, the House Committee on Education annually on or before January 31st. Their report shall include but not limited to the following information: the number of public elementary schools and secondary schools participating in the DARE program, the number of DARE officers in the state, the number of schools provided instruction by the DARE coordinator, and a brief description of the curriculum provided to students. This bill funds that position of the DARE educator, and so that's why I thought it was important to know how many more were educated by that.
Okay. So do we have any questions about the amendment? I think it's a good accountability, good reporting mechanism. Senator Gossage.
Sorry, it's more about the bill and not the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. So any questions about the amendment? Okay, so I have a motion and I have a second from Senator Blasey. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Amendment's on. Any further amendments? At this time, Senator Gossage, what's your comment or question about the bill?
I'm sorry, I had to be in another committee yesterday when this bill was heard. Do we have a fiscal note?
Yes, we do. And I'm thinking it was, why am I thinking it was $200,000? Thank you.
Madam Chair, you're very close. It is $300,000, and that is not currently in this bill, but I believe the House Appropriations Bill does have a line item for this in their budget bill.
Okay. And so that's for salary as well as transportation and any funding needed or for printing or things like that.
Or one FTE, Madam Chair, or
It is one FTE.
one FTE?
Yeah.
I would just like to say, I don't know if everybody got the email that I did regarding the statement that they're already doing this in schools now as part of curriculum, and I wondered if we could address that, if there's somebody who could address that.
And part of the testimony actually came from Representative Essex, and that her husband had, in his role as a PE teacher, was responsible, and then stopped, not DARE, but drug information and training for kids. And what he found is it just kind of dropped off as far as being shared as a part of the curriculum each year for kids. And what we also received in testimony, there are 100 school districts that currently have a DARE program. The others do not. So again, the concern was, and the testimony that we received from the parents, is there really isn't enough focus on drugs and how dangerous drugs are. Even if they look like a prescription drug, they're still very dangerous, and that because of all of the deaths that are occurring with regard to fentanyl, that now is the time, rather than just letting it be something we don't really touch on, to focus on. I would say that was the nexus of the testimony. Senator Blasey and then Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think teaching children the dangers of substance abuse, addiction, and just drugs and fentanyl and the new challenges of today, I think are so very important. And I was glad to see the department share last night that they do have substance abuse and addiction curriculum in our standards. It seems like it needs to be raised as a higher priority. I have to share a lot of the concerns I just heard from this committee regarding cardio emergency response plans. I just don't understand why we need to legislate that when the school board should be hopefully making this a greater priority within their own realm of responsibility.
So, Senator Petty.
Thank you, and I think I appreciate the information that was shared with us about the programs that are already being done within our schools, and that it is part of the standards. I would just remind this committee that DARE is not an effective intervention, is not rated as an evidence-based practice, and even in the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education does not allow funding to be used for the DARE program. And that's not to degrade that program because it's being used by 100 schools, but a lot in our state. And but in this case, we're now funding a new position, and we're, I think, implying that every district should use it. And I think we have we've been provided with information that districts are using tools to address the things that DARE says that they address as well.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this may be a question for the revisor. The local law enforcement works in cooperation with the school districts to implement the DARE program, correct?
That is my understanding. Those local officers are the ones who provide the instruction to the students currently. Under this bill, the educator position would have the authority to provide direct instruction at schools where there is not a trained law enforcement officer.
Okay, but upon request, they could most certainly contact the current director, the DARE director, not this new educator. But if a community or a school or law enforcement office wanted to start a program or reactivate a program, they could most certainly do so on their own accord. Yeah.
Current law provides that the existing DARE coordinator position does have the authority to assist local law enforcement agencies and schools in the creation of local programs.
Okay. So do we have a motion on this bill yet? I'm sorry. I don't remember. Okay, so we don't have a motion. So I think at this point in time, I'll say, do we have a motion on House Bill 2613? Okay, so for lack of motion, we are going to move on. Last thing, and we really do need to get on the floor, and it's House Bill 2669. That's codifying the mental health, the MHIT team program administered by the Department for Aging and Disabilities. This is going to take it from an annual proviso and make it essentially the responsibility of KDADs to be working with the school districts. So Tamara, did you want to give us a quick overview?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you indicated, this program has existed through budget proviso, and that proviso has been for the Department of Education. This bill would essentially take that same program and put it under the authority of the Department for Aging and Disability Services.
Do we have any amendments for this bill? No? Senator Gossage?
I do not have an amendment, but I do feel like, Madam Chair, with the pressure of us being on the floor, and I think this is a lot more discussion than just a quick vote. There are a lot of pieces to this, which is probably why it was only in the proviso and hasn't been put into law. I chaired the Mental Health Committee. We've served on that committee. A lot of discussion about school districts that are already contracting with a local mental health facility that's coming into the school without state funding. I just think there's a lot more to be discussed about this.
Okay.
I would table it.
Okay. Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. So we're going to have a discussion on the motion. Are there any questions on the motion? Senator O'Shea.
Is now an appropriate time to make a substitute motion? Can I make a substitute motion that we pass House Bill 2669 favorably?
And we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on this? Yes, we did. Senator Sykes seconded, I'm sorry. Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor to pass it out favorably, say aye. Opposed? Okay. So I'm sorry. Well, we've got 7 people, so I need a show of hands. Yeah, it tied, which means I heard 3 voices, which means it doesn't pass. So I guess for clarification, in favor, raise your hand. 3, opposed, raise your hand. Okay, it does not pass out. So, committee, we are adjourned. Thank you for your good work. Very quickly, thank you so much to Research, Tamara. Thank you so much, and to our assistant.